Here is the English translation of the story, crafted with the same cinematic, documentary-style narrative tone suitable for your Volley and Voig channel concept. The thousands of people waiting at the cemetery gates were not there merely to witness the passing of a single coffin, they were there to bury their own lost joy. The date was January 20th, 1983, and the only sound mingling with the humid air of Rio de Janeiro was a silent scream of mourning radiating from a desolate hospital room miles away, a room where a breath reeking of alcohol had just been exhaled for the last time. The man lying in that coffin was only 49 years old, yet his face bore the fatigue of 1,000 years. He was not Pelé. He was not the king. He was something far more profound. He was the people themselves. But the most terrifying part of this story is the impossibility of believing that the lifeless body inside that casket was, just 2 decades prior, a deity who had defied the laws of physics, medicine, and logic. How had that child, the one doctor said would struggle to even walk, with an S-shaped spine, a left leg curved outward and a right leg curved inward, managed to shift the axis of the earth? And more importantly, why did this man, who made millions laugh with a single dribble, die alone and penniless? This is not the story of a footballer, this is the story of how an angel's wings were broken. To understand this story, we must leave that hospital room and rewind time to the dusty, impoverished streets of Pau Grande. When Manuel Francisco dos Santos was born, the midwife placed not just a baby into his mother's arms, but a medical anomaly. The child's legs were like saplings bent in the wind, one pointing east, the other west. Medical science had passed a cruel verdict on him: this child will never run, walking will be a challenge. But what science failed to account for was that God sometimes writes his most perfect works with crooked lines. Those bent legs would years later become the nightmare of the world's greatest defenders. His sister gave him the name of a bird as fragile and free as his gait, Garrincha. The little bird. This name would become his destiny, for like a bird, he would fit into no mold, no tactic, and no rule. What set him apart was not just his talent, but his mind. For Garrincha, football was not a career, a vehicle for wealth, or a status symbol. For him, football was a pure game played barefoot on Sundays, rewarded with a cold bottle of soda and a sandwich. His first encounter with the professional world was a testament to this purity. When he went to the trials for Botafogo, standing before him was the legendary left-back of the Brazilian national team, the encyclopedia of football, Nilton Santos. Any young player would tremble before Santos, paralyzed by respect. But Garrincha didn't care. He didn't know who the man was, and even if he did, it wouldn't have mattered. He took the ball, swung those strange, limping legs, and pushed the ball through Nilton Santos's legs as if sending him to the shops to buy bread. Not once, but repeatedly. At the end of the training session, Santos ran to the directors and said, "Sign this madman immediately, or he will play against me, and I will never sleep again." However, Garrincha's tragedy lay hidden within this very innocence. While his intelligence on the pitch was genius level, his intelligence off it remained that of a 10-year-old child. When signing his first professional contract, he didn't even read the numbers on the paper. Had the directors handed him a blank page, he would have signed it all the same. Because he just wanted to play. When they went to the 1958 World Cup, before the match against the Soviet Union, who played the most scientific football of the era, the Brazilian technical staff was deeply worried. How would they counter scientific football? The answer was Garrincha. The first 3 minutes of that match went down in history as the greatest 3 minutes in football history. Garrincha took the ball, put the Russian defense through a blender, hit the post, dribbled past them again, and hit the post once more. The disciplined, robotic Soviet players were shattered in the face of this chaos they had never seen before. After the match, Garrincha turned to his teammates in the locker room and asked that innocent question, "Is the tournament over? Are we going home?" In reality, they had only won a group match. For him, there was no cup, no fame, no medal, there was only the final whistle and the joy of the moment. But life did not resemble the dribbles Garrincha threw at his opponents. Life played a defense he could never bypass. Alcohol. This dark curse, inherited from his father, was slowly weighing down the wings of the little bird. Even at the peak of his fame, he was still that little boy from Pau Grande. He distributed his earnings to friends, left his house doors unlocked, stuffed money into drawers, and forgot about it. The vultures disguised as friends around him gnawed away at his innocence. The 1962 World Cup was both his peak and the beginning of the end. Pelé was injured, and Brazil had fallen into despair. Everyone said, "It's over." But Garrincha, alone, yes, alone, carried Brazil on his back and brought home the cup. What he did in that tournament pushed the boundaries of human logic. In the match against England, even while chasing a stray dog that had run onto the pitch, he made the stadium roar with laughter, only to then dismantle the English defense. He was the joy of the people. But while the people laughed, he was crying inside. His knees were bankrupt. Doctors said, "If you don't have surgery, you will never walk again." But his club, Botafogo, wanted to keep making money off him. They pushed him onto the field with injections and painkillers. While he writhed in pain, the stands chanted, "Garrincha! Garrincha!" Those chants were, in fact, his death warrant. As the years passed, those magical legs no longer obeyed. And when football abandoned him, only silence and bottles remained. The Brazilian people loved him like a saint but did not allow him to live like one. His scandals in his private life, his stormy romance with the famous singer Elza Soares, were turned into circus material by the media. The man once called God was now featured in the back pages of newspapers with headlines screaming drunk. Causing the death of his father in a traffic accident opened a wound in his fragile soul that would never heal. He could no longer dribble. He couldn't dribble past his conscience, his loneliness, or that damned bottle. By the 1980s, during a parade at the Rio Carnival, they set him atop an allegory float. He was wearing his old jersey, but his eyes, those eyes were empty. Under the influence of medication and alcohol, he didn't even know where he was. The crowd applauded him, but he was experiencing the deepest loneliness amidst the throngs. In that moment, he was Brazil's greatest shame, living proof of how they consumed their heroes. No one asked, "How are you, Maine?" Everyone just wanted to see the magic of the past. But the magician's hands were trembling. And that final day, January 20th, 1983. Alcohol coma. His liver had finally rebelled. He died like a pauper in the cheapest room of a public hospital. When he died, he didn't have a penny in his pocket. But the true irony was this: the man who won the 1958 and 1962 World Cups, the man who made Brazilian football a global brand, did not have the money to cover his own funeral costs. Had it not been for former teammates and a few loyal friends stepping in, he might have been buried in a pauper's grave. On his tombstone, this sentence was carved: "Here lies the joy of the people, Mané Garrincha." The bitter taste that lingers in one's throat when this story ends is not just for the death of a footballer. Garrincha showed us that losing is just as human as winning, perhaps even more honorable. He was flawed. His legs were crooked, his decisions were wrong, he had weaknesses. Perhaps that is why they loved him more than Pelé. Because Pelé was an unreachable statue, Garrincha was one of us. One of us who fell, who got up, who made mistakes, and who ultimately lost. Now think about it. As you watch those flawless athletes playing in multi-million-dollar stadiums, with state-of-the-art boots, under dozens of cameras today, do you truly get the same pleasure? Or are your eyes still searching for that little bird on dusty fields, defying physics with his bent legs, calling his defender Joao, and smiling like a pure child after scoring a goal? Perhaps football surrendered its soul the day Garrincha died, and we are merely continuing to watch its corpse.